with Mr. Patel, and today's talk, I have some questions for you about inversions, the category of poses we know as inversions. So one big debate is downward dog. Back to downward dog. Is downward dog an inversion? Yes or no?
What is the question?
Is it an inversion? Should it be on the inversion list?
It's not a complete inversion, but it is an inversion.
So you get some of the benefits that you...
Of inversion, as well as you get the benefit of a forward bend. The other thing that should be known is that there are variations that people do in Shirshasana. One of the variation is to bring the leg down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's kind of a little downward dog.
Or a one-legged downward dog, yeah.
So inversions are considered something where the head is below the trunk.
So that's the definition of an inversion for you.
I have never been given that definition, but that's what I have assumed.
So then Uttanasana would also be an inversion.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Well, I thought we would start a little bit with, I went through my Light on Yoga because I know there's a long description of benefits for particularly Shirshasana and Sarvangasana. But I noticed that Mr. Iyengar doesn't say very much about Adho Mukha Vrikshasana and Pincha Mayurasana. And I was wondering, maybe we could start with those because he didn't have much to say. I was wondering if you have much to say.
I think if Mr. Iyengar had said everything he knows about every posture, the book would not be accommodated in this room.
Okay. All right. Well, because he didn't give us much information on those two poses, maybe let's start with handstand. Can you talk a little bit about what the benefits are physically, energetically for handstand?
See, a posture that's an inversion, but most people cannot hold it for very long. To get that posture to become from physical to physiological is possible. But to go to organic level or pranic level or sensory level, generally not possible. One fanatic may be able to do it, but almost everybody cannot. So that's why emphasis is given much more that you do arm balance to get your arms strong enough, get some flexibility in that direction. How would you then take that ability to Shirshasana? In Shirshasana, so you don't have to be told every so often, lift your shoulder, lift your shoulder, lift your shoulder. When the arms are strong enough, you will create that lift. The biggest complaint in Shirshasana is my neck hurts. Okay? That complaint will go away completely.
So you're looking at handstand more as a path to a pose that you can hold longer.
Yes.
But I would have to say in my own experience, handstand creates a lot of joy. There's that.
I would call that a good thing, but a bonus.
Okay, not the goal, just a side bonus.
And I would take that same thing that I said. Can you take that joy, full sensation to Shirshasana? Then arm balance has taught you something.
Okay. So then, so handstand, would you say, is the most accessible of the inversions if we're looking at handstand, forearm balance, headstand?
Most accessible,
Yeah.
yes.
So then the next pose in that would be Pincha Mayurasana, forearm balance. So can you talk about the difference between handstand and forearm balance?
In handstand, you are on your hand. Obvious difference.
Yes.
Okay. Forearm balance, you are on your upper arms. Okay. What changes between those two? In handstand, your hands can be apart. Elbows can even be a little closer to each other, which gives an access to a much deeper aspect of the muscles near the vertebral column. Elbow balance or forearm balance doesn't do that. Hands are together, elbows are apart. Immediately what that does is it rotates the arms internally.
Well, we've got this one, and then Mr. Iyengar shows this one.
Both.
Yeah.
But even in this one, if you notice, most people are given a block between the hands
Right.
and a belt around for
Right.
the same reason.
Right.
That if nothing is given, tendency is to do this.
Right.
And like I often say in the class, what the body can automatically do is generally wrong.
That's so frustrating. I don't know whose idea that was, but it's very true and always annoying. So you're saying the basic difference is that you're internally rotating the forearms, and then that makes it more challenging.
Yes.
How does that prepare you better for Shirshasana?
Because Shirshasana, you're automatically internally rotating the arms, except in Nirlamba Shirshasana. And if you notice, what people do is, in Shirshasana, they are in this position. When they go to Nirlamba Shirshasana, they very often forget the primary reason. They think is to balance on the neck. It's not. It's to see that you can keep your hands away from each other, elbows towards each other, which in Shirshasana you cannot do. Which again gives a very different access to widening the shoulder blades away and working near the vertebral column.
Okay, that's a physical response, addressing the physical. Can you say anything about energetically when we move from forearm balance to headstand?
The kind of effect I told you about near the vertebral column, that builds up a basis from where organic work can happen. If this area is collapsing, even though if I think I'm lifting, but I'm not quite really, because there is no wide space there, then that work doesn't happen, organic work, and certainly not pranic work. Because I might feel the breath in the belly, but I don't feel any movement of the breath up here. Mm-hmm. When the fact is the breath moves from the chest, that becomes accessible.
So one of the big differences between handstand and forearm balance is you're in a bit more of a back bend in forearm balance. And am I correct in translation that Pinchamayurasana is peacock feather? Is that the correct translation?
That's the correct translation, yeah.
And is it named such because of the bend in the feather? No, tell me.
It's a poetical expression.
Okay.
We get into a lot of trouble over this. Something that is given as a poetical expression cannot be literally translated, and certainly not into another language. Look at peacock feather. If you see it, yes, it's curved. But if you look at it sort of with artistic eye even, you see that it's not collapsing. Even though there is a bend, it is lifting. Okay? That expression has given rise to the name Pinchamayurasana.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, how peacock feather, any feather, not just peacock feather, any long feather you see, there is a lift in it.
But a peacock feather is not unique, but more different than like a bird's feathers in that it has that top part
and
that's
it's
bigger.
Substantially longer.
Yeah,
also.
so then there is a little more bend and sway in it. So you're saying that when you're balancing in the pose, there's a little bit of sway? Is that...
A little bit of sway, but more than the sway. Even though a little bit of sway is automatic to most people, within the sway there is an energetic lift. It's not just a sway.
So forearm balance, it demands more shoulder strength, more to stay. I find handstand I can stay longer. Forearm balance easier to get up, but harder to stay up. So is that again to prepare the upper body strength for Shirshasana?
And really, the strength has got to translate to the cervical, not cervical, the whole spinal column lifting or lengthening.
So generally, if you were taking a class of intermediate folks, you would first make sure their handstand was solid, and then you would teach them forearm, and then introduce headstand? Is that
That would be a theoretical idea in my head.
Okay. Tell us what else is in there in your head.
No, but I would look at the people that are doing the pose
Yeah.
and then find various ways of encouraging them to do better.
Is there anything that comes to mind why you would choose to go from handstand to headstand as opposed to handstand, forearm, and then headstand? Like, is there something that...
Nothing specific that comes to my mind right now, but again, I would say I would look at the people doing the pose.
And what are you looking at?
Energetic movement.
So the whole person, or their eyes, or
whole body,
whole
not the
body?
person.
And how much energy you see that they can stay lifted in an inversion? Is that accurate?
Yeah. But if I look at the whole person, if that's the thought going on in my head, the teaching changes considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Because the emphasis does not become physical action. Emphasis become like, why on earth are you doing this? What for? You are not doing it for strength. Strength is there simply to provide a basis for something else. Otherwise, and I say this often also in the class, that without that emphasis, it is gymnastics. Not that there's anything wrong with gymnastics, but it's not yoga. So if I'm looking at the whole person, I'm thinking something different. Okay? But it's like this. If I look at a beginner who doesn't have strength to do anything, then I don't look at the whole person because the foundation is not there.
Right.
Okay? Automatically my eye goes towards their physical abilities, their breathing, their facial expressions. So you teach at that level. It's very much like, you don't take a kindergarten class and try to teach them nuclear physics.
Well, I just want to take a little side street here. Is in the United States, most of us teachers are making a living by teaching classes that have multiple people in them. And in any given class, you may have people that are more beginner and more advanced. And so the advanced people are saying, hey, I want to get into my headstand. And half the class you're like, isn't ready for headstand. What do you do as a teacher? Do you...
I first pray.
Okay, that's always a good thing to start with.
God, you gave me this challenge. Please help me to deal with it. Because obviously, by myself, as this egoistic person, I really don't have the ability to conduct this class. So what happens in a class like this, generally in a workshop that can happen, okay? Somewhere along the line, without making any effort, Ramanand, sort of drops out and something else takes over. At the end of the class, I surprise myself like, wow.
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? Yeah. But if I try to figure out here are 5 beginners, here are 5 advanced students, and 5 intermediate, I can't.
I kind of know what you mean, because I definitely, now I've been teaching over 20 years. And how many years have you been teaching, by the way?
Too many.
Okay, but a lot.
Yeah.
Like over 20 times 2, right?
I started teaching in 1968.
Okay, we'll have someone do the math. When do you feel like, I could say for myself that I felt this shift in being able to see people, like you're saying, but not to the level you can. So when in your teaching trajectory do you feel like that started to happen?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's like asking, when did you grow up from 12 years
Yeah,
to...
but sometimes you look back and go, wow, I just started noticing that I don't need my notes anymore. Or
Very well. I never read my notes.
Yeah.
I go to the class, I look at what's going on with people, talk to them. In fact, I would say, if nobody asked any question, I would have difficulty teaching the class. Because I'm not relating to what's going on with their life.
Right.
Fortunately for me, more often than not, somebody has some question. And what I found interesting, by the way, is that, if I teach Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, on Tuesday somebody asks a question. almost always, not always, but almost always, on Wednesday it will be the same question, Thursday it will be the same question.
From a different person.
From a different person.
Yes.
And so my feeling was that somehow the universe, the cosmos produces this.
I completely agree. I've talked to many yoga teachers about this. It's like, have you been seeing a lot of lower back problems coming in on the same day? Like, it is very strange. Okay, so back to our regularly scheduled program. All right, so let's talk about headstand first. So Mr. Iyengar has a long list of benefits. I mean, they're like kind of over the top. So I'm wondering, he calls it number 1, king of the asana. It's the seat of Brahman. Okay, these are big claims. People's thoughts will become clearer. People suffering from loss of sleep and memory have recovered with regular practice. Coupled with Sarvangasana Shoulderstand, helps constipation. So, I mean, there were a lot. I just took a couple of highlights. What are your thoughts about all of those claims? I mean, that's...
And coming from a Grand Master like him, I would say they are justified. However, look at therapeutic work in general. Okay? Generally, within therapeutic system of yoga, it is recognized that whichever posture helps a particular condition, if the same posture is done incorrectly, it will aggravate that condition. Now apply that to the king of the posture, Shirshasana. If your neck is already hurting, then you do Shirshasana incorrectly, it's going to ruin that neck completely. It's supposed to help it, but it won't. Okay? So, in a sense, because it's a difficult posture, although with practice most people can hold it for a longer period to allow for that change from physical all the way to organic, sensory and so on. Okay? A similar king of the posture can be called Urdhva Dhanurasana, but almost nobody can hold it that long.
Right.
So here is a posture which can be held longer, where you can get that progression. But if you are holding it longer by muscular effort, even when the posture physically is collapsing, that would be a dangerous thing to do and should not be done. The difficulty with that lies in that if I am in Mr. Iyengar's presence and he is kind of pushing me with his wonderful methods, I can hold it longer. But if with that memory I come home and say, I was able to do it there, so I can do it here. Mr. Iyengar is not here. I have to pretend like he is here. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And yet, there must come a time when I don't need him. I should be able to do it myself. So, there is an inner Iyengar that works. So, I would agree that being a difficult posture and yet a posture that most people with practice can hold longer, you can penetrate from one level to the other. But if the king is angry, aren't you in trouble?
Depends on who you are.
And look at Donald Trump. He's angry. And how many Republicans just simply quieten down? Yes, sir.
So you're likening a bad headstand to Donald Trump?
Yeah. In my view, and politically, that would be my opinion. But those who like him certainly love him.
Okay. I would like to start with, I did a little research with my questions, and in Light on Yoga, Mr. Iyengar says all of the weight, or most of the weight, I think all of the weight should be on the crown of the head. And then, wow, on the internet, there's all these articles, Mr. Iyengar shouldn't have said that, and that's led to people with having neck problems. And so let's start with the crown of the head. What is your take on that instruction?
If you have closer to the ideal body, you should be on the crown of the head.
All of the weight, or most of the weight.
Yes. Nobody has that. Nobody has an ideal body like that. That comes around after years of practice.
Yeah.
Assuming you inherited a good body to start with. Someone like Mr. Iyengar, who although initially did not have a good physique, but through very dedicated practice developed it. Okay? How many people have that kind of dedicated practice?
Not many.
Not many.
Yeah. So then my next question is, okay, if it's not supposed to be on the crown of the head because a lot of us don't have ideal bodies, what is your take on, like, okay, the most common things I see is maybe a blanket under the head but not under the elbows. That really helps keep the weight out of the head. You could set up the blocks where it's helping to lift your thoracic and that keeps the weight out of the head. Do you think those are just as beneficial or no?
Those are very serious mistakes.
Oh, talk about that.
If somebody's upper arm is short,
Yeah.
but the neck is long, they should not put the head on a blanket and the arms on the floor. Completely the opposite.
Should be under the elbows and not
Under
the head.
the elbows, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was saying it if that's the appropriate thing that they should be doing, but they're not taking the weight in the crown of their head like a classic optimal body. Is it as beneficial or is it slightly less beneficial?
I would look at their breath
Okay.
and their coloration of skin and so on. Same posture today may be beneficial to you because of whatever has happened in last 24 hours. Tomorrow, for the same person, the same posture, I might say, don't hold it as long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But I decide that by my own experience in my body. Why am I able to hold the posture much better one day, and the next next day it seems to laugh at me? Should I not respond to how I am feeling? I do that with other things. The day I feel hungry, I eat a lot more. When I don't feel hungry, I don't.
So you think this idea of saying, I'm going to do headstand 5 minutes every day is a bad approach?
It's a good beginning, but to use it as a fanatical approach is bad.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I should do the posture. I wouldn't say that to a raw beginner. But as people get more experience, they should be able to decide by other sensations whether they should continue to hold the posture or repeat more often. The real teaching would be to teach people how to judge that.
Can you say something about that?
Yeah, in a large class, that's difficult to do.
Right.
Because in a large class, often I don't even know everybody.
Right.
Large classes that have come about, especially now in the Western world, is not the way it was taught in India. Original teaching was few students, one teacher, sometimes one teacher, one student.
Mm-hmm.
And if there were more students, there were always other senior students helping. But economically, that cannot work here.
Right. So then how do you empower the student to know? What are you trying to impart to them? Whether they should do a 2-minute headstand today or an 8-minute headstand this day?
In my teaching, I have really come to fall in love with the sensation of movement of the head diaphragm. Yeah.
For those of our people might be listening that don't know what that is, can you briefly describe it?
When I'm out of breath and I'm struggling with the breath, like after running, I look at what is the feeling in the head is the head seems to expand with inhalation. Even after running, if I consciously attempt to do the opposite in my head, on inhalation, release the brain in. On exhalation, let the brain have a sense of releasing out. Brain doesn't move very much, but the sensation is big. Mm-hmm. I recover from that fast run very quickly.
And you use that as your metric to see whether you
Yes,
should...
I do.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know most people don't teach that way. Okay? But in my teaching, I have found that very useful. Even having someone that's very dedicated to the practice, loves Ramanand, but is a very old person. I'm thinking of is Maria Marta. Yeah? She comes out of Trikonasana, where she cannot usually hold more than a minute, and says, wow, I don't feel tired.
Because you were cueing her around the brain diaphragm.
Yes.
That's a great story.
And at the same time, I have a friend, student, who now lives in Hawaii, used to live in Santa Fe. Because of her own learning and teaching, really objected that no, I don't feel this in my head. I feel on inhalation the brain expands, on exhalation. So I said, look, I am teaching you what I feel and what I find to be correct. If in your body, for whatever reason, something different happens, go by your feeling. When you are taking your last breath in your life, you don't want to say, I wish I had done this the way I wanted to do it. That is a very stupid way to die.
Agreed. Okay, so I'm also thinking another popular variation of headstand is the one between the chairs or hanging in the ropes if people have ropes. Can you again just tell us, do you feel like that is almost as beneficial as doing a headstand?
I think some of the benefits that are coming from inversion, the way the heart works, are even better in a pelvic sling hanging than in Shirshasana. Okay. Overall, nothing touches Shirshasana.
What do you mean?
Nothing is as beneficial.
Can you say what the benefits of Shirshasana are, please? I mean, just a few. I know, we'd volumes, but...
See, when you ask a question like that, my mind goes into, why on earth am I doing Shirshasana to start with?
But you just made a big statement, so...
Yeah, the big statement is, it helps me towards enlightenment, towards knowing who I am. Not only because of the immediate physical struggle that is involved, but when it begins to be more accessible, I'm able to hold it longer. The brain is in a very different state, does different things. Even after I coming out of the head balance, okay, there remains a sense that I'm still in Shirshasana. Okay? Happens with every posture really, but with head balance it seems to happen more often for me. Same with Sarvangasana. That doesn't have, if I'm in Trikonasana for half hour, when I come out I do feel a little lopsided, but I don't quite feel I'm in Trikonasana. Whereas in Shirshasana, if I'm able to hold it longer, which incidentally I was never able to hold it that long. Sarvangasana I can hold half hour or longer. But in Sarvangasana, for example, even after I'm out of the posture, that inner joy of being in the posture is still there.
Okay, well, you're upside down, so there's a lot of physiological things happening, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
No.
So would you say more about that?
There is an energetic sensation that happens. There is a sensation of calmness that happens. There is a sensation of the whole outer world kind of becoming irrelevant, disappearing. That sensation that happens, which is leading towards a sense of meditation, okay, where the brain is not running here, there and everywhere. All my external needs or wants disappear.
And that pose more than any other pose?
In that pose more than any other pose. For reasons that we already talked about.
Yeah. Interesting.
I wish I could hold Shirshasana for as long. I never could.
But you were just about to say a little more about the sling, why you get more benefit. Well, why is that? Because you can hold it longer?
Because I can hold it longer. Much longer than I can hold Shirshasana. I had a bad shoulder injury as a child that has never allowed me to hold the headstand that long.
But is there something, okay, so with the pelvic sling, you've also got, it's holding your iliums in, so there's something extra there.
Yes,
so,
I'm in Baddha Konasana basically.
Yeah, so what can you say is energetically different about that? The openness of the pelvis, or?
Openness of the pelvis allows my breath, effect of the breath, to be felt much deeper in the pelvic floor, which I could feel in Sarvangasana, but I never could feel it in Shirshasana, or almost never.
Until you went into the pelvic sling. Interesting. What if you were doing Shirshasana and then brought your feet into Baddha Konasana in the middle of the room, let's say?
It would be better.
But not as good as the sling.
Not as good as in a hanging position. And to extend that further, I'm in a sling, but instead of keeping my legs in Baddha Konasana, if I stretch my legs up, That's interesting feeling. That teaches me something about what I should do in Shirshasana on the floor.
Right. Or there's the version, and if you have ropes, you can put the legs straight with a plank across your thighs, which is quite nice because it helps to ground your femurs, right?
And if I recall correctly, very, very often, even though Mr. Iyengar would insist for the students to be straight, he was often in a posture that I would call is close to Viprit Karni. Not always.
Describe that.
The pelvis would tilt back and he's straightening the leg from that. There's a clear more lordosis. Okay? But I didn't talk to him about that particular thing. But if in a similar conversation, let's say I was to ask him, like, why do you do this? His response might be, you are not ready for it. If you can do it, it would be nice, but you are not ready for it. I am learning from moment to moment. And he maintained that position to the very end when I saw him. That you people think you know yoga. I am still learning.
Right. I have seen photographs where he's taking more weight also on the forward part of his head. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, if I feel compromised in my cervical spine, where I feel I have the strength, but the cervical extension is lacking, then I would do that. In fact, for my neck, I often used to do that, come much more on the forehead.
Okay, well, if Mr. Iyengar went on and on in his Light on Yoga about Shirshasana, he really went on about Sarvangasana. There's way more talked about in there about the benefits, many more benefits. Let me just start with, do you agree with that there are more benefits?
I personally agree
benefits
with it, simply because it sort of, pumps my ego up that I can hold this longer than most people can.
Okay, can you put your ego aside and answer the question?
Because I can hold it longer, the chance of the posture going from physical to physiological to organic and so on is much bigger.
Right. And do you think that's why he said that? Because most people can hold shoulder stand longer?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
It's makes sense.
Yeah. And then he calls that pose the mother of asana. Where does he, do you know where he gets these references of calling Shirshasana king and Sarvangasana queen?
I have to tell you a little separate story.
Okay.
Because what's happening is that he's thinking in Indian terms, using Indian cultural things, putting it into English, and then people who don't have that background at all are interpreting it literally. Okay? I'm thinking of a wonderful poem I heard when I was a little kid, which most English people know. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the sky so high, like a diamond in the sky. Now imagine somebody who has no background of where this comes from, learns English language and says, these English people were funny. They thought star was little, they thought star was above the sky, and they thought the star was twinkling. If that is literally translated into another culture, what would you say? It's absurd. You can't do that.
All right. Fair enough. I withdraw the question.
Mother in Indian culture is, for want of a better word, is like the king of the house. Within the four walls of a house, even the father doesn't have that kind of authority. Outside, dad is a king. Inside, mother is a king. And by that, when the mother becomes a grandmother, she's totally in charge of everything. Not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, every way.
Okay, so tie that to Sarvangasana.
Sarvangasana gives a sense of better understanding, better control over all different levels of asana practice, to the point of putting the brain in a meditative state, which is kind of a final state. Yeah? So it feels like it's answering all my questions with regard to what I want from this asana practice, which the king doesn't do. King is demanding.
Well, I definitely feel like headstand is more stimulating to me, and when I do a longer shoulder stand, I feel what you're talking about, kind of that calming, quieting down. And is it just because I can hold shoulder stand longer, or is the energetics of the pose?
I think primarily it's because you can hold it longer. There are other physical differences, but
yeah,
main reason is because you can hold it longer.
Interesting.
Think of this. Mother is at home. She's preparing a meal. You are out in the field working, where father is asking you to do more and more and more work. Okay? While it is being done lovingly, but there is a pressure of do. You go home and mother says, sit down, be quiet and enjoy this meal. That's the difference. Shirshasana is demanding, is rajasic in many ways. Sarvangasana is not.
It's pretty demanding.
For some people.
Okay. It's my nemesis.
Yeah. But for the same person, I'm thinking obviously of Ramanand.
Okay.
For Ramanand, headstand is not only more challenging physically, but more demanding. And no matter how well I do with it, it is always like, that's not good enough. I did my best, but that's not good enough. Sarvangasana gives me a completely different feeling. Because I can hold it longer, I can do it more effectively than almost anybody can. Okay? I could hold shoulder stand as long as Mr. Iyengar can. And if you pushed it to 3 hours, I can hold it for 3 hours. But at the end, it doesn't give me a feeling like I'm depleted.
Right. So is that what you're talking about, the reason that in most lineages of Hatha yoga, Hatha yoga,
not yoga. It's Hatha yoga.
Hatha yoga.
There is no yoga or hatha. That last A, you should cancel it.
All right. I'll see if our sponsors will let us cancel the A. Is that why headstand is usually taught first or practiced first? Is it because of what you're saying?
In some traditions, it is not.
I know. I'm saying in most traditions, you do headstand before shoulder stand. Can you?
But I think the two traditions cannot be directly compared in the sense that in the tradition where they do the headstand afterwards, they don't hold it very long at all.
Right.
Okay. Whereas in Iyengar's case, it is held much longer.
Yeah. And so can you say why you want to do that? Why you want to do headstand before shoulder stand?
Headstand, to put it simply, can increase blood pressure, can increase the sense of rajasic attitude, can increase anger even. Sarvangasana calms it down. So if you are going to have an approach where there is a lot of dynamic work, you do want to finish with something that is calming. Not depleting, but calming. Sarvangasana does that.
Can you comment on the name Sarvangasana, all limb pose?
Again, I would go to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Okay, well, I'd like you to clarify that.
First of all, it's not all limbs.
Okay.
Limbs in English means arms and legs.
Right.
Okay. The name is Anga. Anga means parts of the body. And even then, it's not a reference just to the physical part. It's much deeper. Sarva Anga Asana means it fulfills all different dimensions. To translate that into all limbs posture is kind of twinkle, twinkle, little.
So all parts is more accurate. And it
not
means,
even just physical parts.
right.
All aspects of you as a person, as a human being.
And so that's one of the reasons you were saying that you get so much more out of it because of that? And
Now,
headstand.
he might be able to get it in Shirshasana also.
I was going to say, so you can't get that in headstand?
Very few people can.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people can.
Because of strength.
Because of strength.
Okay, because I asked you this about Shirshasana with Shoulderstand, Sarvangasana. Let's start with the blankets, because that, of course, is like a huge controversial thing about how many blankets, should I use blankets, etc., etc. Could you tell us something about that, and then I'll ask about variations.
You're talking about blankets under the shoulders.
Blankets under the shoulders, yes.
It's a prop.
Yes.
For literally hundreds of years, Sarvangasana was done in India, where nobody used a blanket like that, where the shoulders were elevated and the head was lower.
Right.
Okay? But these people were ready for Sarvangasana. Now Sarvangasana is done by raw beginners who are not ready for it. But because of other benefits, it is said, okay, let's give you some support so you can do it. In England, they have thick mats. In Pune now, those thick mats are taken. You can't roll them. They put 3 mats or more, put everybody in line and put them in. This has become kind of standard at Iyengar Institute.
Yeah.
So I directly asked Mr. Iyengar that I told him, for thousands of years, Sarvangasana was done without any support. His response was, you people come here and complain of neck problems. I'm tired of dealing with it. So use a height. Then it became sacrosanct that everybody should use a height. And it becomes part of the teacher training. When he never meant that, he never himself did it. And if advanced or seasoned students were doing it without any support under the shoulder, he never objected to it.
So can you say why he was doing it, besides neck problems? What does taking the blankets or the mats under your shoulders, I think I know, but I want to hear your take on it.
If you take support under the shoulder, it allows you to push the head of the humerus down and get the 7 cervical off the floor. Now what I have seen, I'm thinking of a particular person, where they used to use 2 blankets, then the neck bothered them, so they had 1 more blanket. And some 3-4 years later when I saw them, they were doing Shirshasana on a pile this high. Sarvangasana,
yeah.
rather. So I looked at it and I said, the prop was supposed to help you to lift the 7 cervical off the floor. Now you are resting on it in such a way that it goes more into the floor. This was never the intention of Sarvangasana.
Right.
Okay. Even when my father, who first taught me all this, some of these postures, even at that time, long before I met Mr. Iyengar, I was told not to drop the 7 cervical on the floor like that.
Can you talk about why that's important that happens, and what happens when I see a lot of people who just don't want to use props because they feel like it's a sign of weakness, and their 7 cervicals on the ground, and they don't want to listen to reason. So can you say why it's important that it lift and what happens when it doesn't lift?
I think they're looking for another incarnation where they will correct it. And physiologically, the way the neck is, you do not want to reverse the cervical curve. If the 7 cervical vertebra drops like that on the floor, you are going to reverse that curve. Some people, by using a height, are able to lift the chin away and sort of attempt to recreate that curve. But the root of the curve is in the occipital area and in the 7 cervical. One of the 2 roots is collapsing down. Okay? Think of sitting on a large bench. This side, the legs are holding you. The other side, the bench collapses. Would you sit on that bench to have an ice cream?
No. So what can happen to somebody who is prop averse and they don't care that their seventh cervical is dropping? What's the long-term effect of that?
That person, to me, in today's terminology, is saying that I am averse to vaccination, so no matter what happens, I will not take vaccination. That's your choice. You live in America. If you ask me, like, scientifically, logically, is it better for you? Yeah. But if you have an aversion to it, then psychologically it's not good for you.
And so they may end up with neck pain, but
They may end up with, and you might find somebody who is so sort of strong that even though they do it without this prop, they never hurt their neck. But that to me is like, I find children playing, let's say, soccer in the middle of the street. And I go and tell them that, this is dangerous. And the child tells me, I do it every day, nothing happens. Would you therefore consider it correct? No. It is dangerous still.
right,
The fact that nobody gets hurt, you are fortunate.
right.
So just because somebody by doing wrong, anatomically incorrect Sarvangasana doesn't get hurt, that's fortunate. It's not correct. But if they insist on doing it their way, I wouldn't object. Because ultimately, what do you want from yoga? You want freedom. Why take their freedom away? But I had somebody in India I saw that Mr. Iyengar even knew was smoking. Not in the class, but just before coming to the class or immediately after going out of the class, they would smoke. And Mr. Iyengar one day told this woman in the class that, don't you think I know you are smoking? But you are smoking and hurting the body. This is compensating for that. It's not good for you to smoke. But if you are not going to stop doing yoga and not going to stop smoking, what am I to tell you? Go ahead.
Yes, we all have our own path, right?
We all have our own path.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the variations that folks can do in shoulder stand. So if you're not able to do it in the middle of the room, often you're told to do it near a wall, so you can do it with bent legs on the wall, or even better than that is the back edge of the heels on the wall with straight legs. And then there's chair shoulder stand. Do you feel those variations are just as beneficial?
For that person, yeah.
For the person who can't do the one in the middle of the room.
They're doing what they can.
So you want to go to the one that's the most challenging. I mean, here's a question. So let's say I can do shoulder stand in the middle of the room for 3 minutes, but then it starts to collapse and I don't have, but if I'm at the wall, I can stay for 10 minutes. Should I do it one way and one the other way, or?
Yeah, if I would alternate one day this way, one day that way. Then slowly, in the beginning you might only do, 1 day in the middle of the room, but other 6 days against the wall. Then slowly, instead of only 1 day a week, you make it twice a week.
Right.
You gradually increase it.
So you're trying to get your strong version that you can hold for 10 minutes, you're trying to take that into the least supported version that you can do. Okay.
And I don't think there's a linear progression there. It's back and forth.
Yeah. I want to talk about chair shoulder stand because that is unique in the shoulder stand variations, that it's kind of shoulder stand and it's kind of Viparita Karni. Can you comment on that particular variation of it? That's a very popular one done in the Iyengar system. Now, yeah, yeah. You can tell us if you were around for the evolution of that.
See, let's take somebody who is not going to do the classical standard way, but they will only do it with a chair. Then there are people who will only do it with a chair, but actually go to Viparita Karni kind of action. Otherwise, they don't want to do it. We live in a free country and free society.
Okay, so is your answer the same? If it's the only variation you can do, it's better than not doing it at all.
Yeah. Can do is different. If it's the only variation you will do, I would say, what are you looking for? You are looking for comfort. Okay? What is comfortable, in most cases, muscularly, is weakening. If you need a support, you use a support. But to make it completely comfortable so your muscle is not even active or less active is not desirable in my view. But take somebody who loves Sarvangasana on a chair in a Viparit Karni position. Otherwise is never going to touch that posture. For that person, I would say, yeah, fine. Who am I to determine how far this person... The intent is to strengthen the body and the muscle. But if they choose not to strengthen, I know Ramanand Patel, who used to slump in the chair completely as a child, and every so often father would say, sit up straight. So while he's watching, I sit up straight. The moment he's not locking, I collapse again. And my mind as a child would say, this is easier, so why not? The fact that this is damaging to the body was totally theoretical. Although I heard it, I knew it, but it was like, no, it doesn't damage my back. I can still play soccer.
Right.
But that was the wrong conclusion.
Okay. I was surprised when I was preparing for this interview that as in my mind, I thought, of course, Viparita Karni would be in Light on Yoga, and it's not. Why do you think it's not in there?
I think you have to ask Mr. Hanger that.
No
question.
idea. Is it something that he taught?
Yeah.
You can. Okay.
But I saw it done more in what he called therapeutic classes, which was used to be initially once a week. Then I think it was twice a week. But you had to go in the evening to help in that class.
Okay.
To some specific people, he would say, do Viparit Karni, not everybody.
Okay.
Then he started doing Viparit Karni with... See, Mr. Iyengar constantly invented in light of whatever he saw. Okay? Viparit Karni, they started doing with the legs against a column, where the thighs were tied to the column.
Right.
And if you have ever done it, you will find that that is even more wonderful. Every way in which Viparit Karni is wonderful, that wonderfulness is enhanced by being tied to the column.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have a column at home.
Right, which is a problem. So then I went to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, where they go on and on and on about the benefits of Viparita Karni, and also the more classic pose. There's no props, right? You're kind of dropped over your hands in a shoulder stand, more upper body position, but your pelvis is dropped back and your legs are up. Like you were kind of describing, Mr. Iyengar was doing a little bit in Shoulderstone, right? Can you say, and it also says in the commentary in that book that it will eliminate death if you hold it for something like 3 hours, which I know is being poetic language. But
Twinkle, twinkle,
yes.
little star. How many yogis do you know from ancient India that are still alive?
I don't know any.
So none of them did Viparit Karni?
Well, maybe they're living in the caves. They don't want to be known.
Tell her, only the tigers are in the cave today.
They ate the yogis?
No, they are the yogis.
Okay. Oh, the tigers are. Okay. So can you say a little bit about how that pose is different from shoulder stand, for example, energetically? It almost seems like an earlier version of shoulder stand. No?
No. Shoulder stand has several therapeutic effects, particularly with regard to pelvic abdominal area, and even more so for women than for men, although for men also it could be good. all of those effects, if you are to achieve therapeutically for someone, are better or easier because they can hold the posture with, it's all supported posture,
Right.
are better in Viparit Karni. The only thing that Viparit Karni comparatively lacks is legs are more active in Sarvangasana. They are less active in Viparit Karni. But then the genius of Mr. Iyengar said, okay, I will make the legs more active in Viparit Karni by tying them. Okay? That tying is not done just to hold the legs together. When the legs are tied together, the bones act better. But as I said, being a genius, he says, interesting. In Viparit Karni it works better. Why don't I tie the legs in Sarvangasana? He was a person who always pushed towards a better direction. And, he learned both from his ability of this, being gifted a genius, but also he would have to admit that he learned from the mistakes of his students. When the student made a mistake, the student didn't know how to correct it. Mr. Iyengar found a way of correcting it. I had somebody come here one time to learn something of yoga from, and he said, I don't see why Mr. Iyengar doesn't give credit to his teacher. I said, look at Light on Yoga. On the first page, the credit is given. So this idea that he doesn't give credit to his teacher is wrong. You heard it from somewhere. Why nobody used props before now? Why? I said, okay, do it without the prop and let me see. Then I showed him how he was collapsing. He said, yes, prop helps. But traditionally it was never used. I said, every tradition changes and should change in light of more information. Otherwise you should be living in a cave. And he left.
And you don't know what happened, whether he got props or what.
He writes to me maybe once a year now, asking for guidance on what to do.
Well, that means he's maybe practicing. That's good. Okay, so in the Iyengar method, women who are menstruating are told not to invert. Again, for people who might not be familiar with the method, can you talk about why that is?
Because the energy, not only just the blood, but with it the energy that should flow out, that flow is reversed. There is no scientific investigation done of this that I know of. However, we know specific examples of people who refused to listen to that advice and got hurt. Okay? Now, if you want to take a chance with it, I heard just last week, this 16-year-old kid is going to fly around the world to break the record. I would congratulate him, but he's taking a risk.
So you're saying people with uteruses could, on their menstrual cycle, go upside down, but they're taking a risk.
Yes.
And the risk is? You could say they hurt themselves, but can you be more specific?
I think they would find that energy depleting. And when that happens, medical science doesn't have an answer for them because they don't understand what's going on. All they would say is, why do you do it?
Okay. Okay, and I would love for you to say a little bit more about prana apana with inversions. Can you talk about why they're such an important part of a yoga practice prana-wise, pranically?
See, there are 5 major pranas and 5 minor pranas. I don't want to go into details.
I don't want you to. That's another talk.
But the 2 aspects of that pranic energy moving in the body, over which I have somewhat of control, ability to manipulate, are the pranavayu and the apanavayu. Hatha Yoga and Ayurveda defines apanavayu as what we call abdominal breath, and even more the pelvic breath. The way Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks of prana, apana, samayukta, pachaminam, chaturvidam. Balancing in breath and out breath. I balance 5 digits kinds of. Yeah. The exhalation is called apana. So we have to be careful with terminology. Same word is used to mean something different. So don't go to Bhagavad Gita and say Bhagavad Gita says, exhalation is apana. Bhagavad Gita can say then for Bhagavad Gita it is correct because he meant exhalation. Okay. Here the meaning of apana is different. Where we talk of apana is the movement that happens as a result of inhalation. Inhalation does something to prana. That something done to the prana in the lower body is different. That different is called apana.
Okay.
What else do you want me to say?
Well, I want you to say when you practice inversions a little bit more seriously, meaning you can hold them for a little bit longer. What is the effect on those two? Like, why is that helpful?
For a variety of reasons. Generally, what we call physical health, apart from breath and circulation and so on, it depends on what goes on in your pelvic abdominal area. Even more specifically, what happens to your digestive system. Still more specifically, what happens to the eliminative system. Okay? Food should be properly chewed and digested. But even after that, whatever waste is left, if it is not properly eliminated, it will cause ill health to the body. This is Ayurveda. Yoga goes further with and says, okay, how through postures we can help that particular part. So, apana vayu, as it relates to the eliminative system, is given much more importance. Not that the other parts are not important, but this is a primary thing. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you go to India to a good Vaid, Ayurvedic doctor, one of the first, no matter what complaint you go with, the first question you would ask is, how is your eliminative system? How is your bowel movement? Because they solidly believe, and I think correctly, if that goes wrong, many other things will go wrong in the body.
Okay. So
it's very important. So in inversions particularly, the way the sensation of that apana vayu is, you can learn to direct it particularly to help this system. It requires some teaching. People can't automatically do it. But generally, if you find that somebody has, minor constipation and they do inversion, they want to then go to the bathroom and eliminate.
Okay, so this may sound like a dumb question, but we just talked about menstruation. You shouldn't go upside down because the natural flow is down, and we don't want to reverse that. Well, the natural flow of elimination is down, but we're turning ourselves upside down. You're saying that would be better for elimination and constipation. Can you explain that?
So, are you saying that somebody who is menstruating but is constipated, what they should do?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the downward. We don't want to interrupt the downward flow of energy when someone's on their period.
No. Let me continue that trend of thought.
Okay.
Let's say literally somebody came and you told them they are constipated and you want to tell them that inversion is good for you. But they say, no, I have my period. What would you tell them?
I would say, let's talk to Ramanand.
No. Even for people who are menstruating, the teaching given is that don't do inversions every time you are menstruating.
Right.
Occasionally, for some reason, if you need to do it, that is acceptable. Even to learn, if you want to do inversion, briefly is acceptable. Don't make a habit of it. It's a long-term, repetitive inversion done by somebody who is menstruating each time, that there is an energetic problem with it. There is no physical problem with it. Your blood is not going to go reverse itself.
I understand.
But there's an energetic problem with it, which the ill effect registers after long improper practice.
So in my body, I feel when I was menstruating, like the apana would be very dominant. Like I could feel the shift. So you're saying if you're constipated, for example, then your apana is not flowing, so let's turn you upside down?
Yes.
Is that the reasoning there?
Quite, yeah.
Okay. So it's trying to...
But if somebody all the time is constipated and all the time is menstruating...
Right.
Yeah,
I know.
great.
Right. What about the opposite problem? What about someone who has diarrhea a lot, like irritable bowel syndrome? Would the inversions
They can
help
also
with that?
do inversion, but with more support.
And what would be the difference energetically between someone who's constipated, where the apana is not flowing, and someone who's got diarrhea?
First of all, the diarrhea should not be because of some,
Right.
improper food and so
Right,
on.
not parasite or anything like that.
Or parasite.
Yeah.
That has to be.
Right.
Yoga won't correct
But
that.
let's say it's somebody that has constant irritable bowel syndrome, and that's their expression of it.
Then I would say they have a weakness, right?
Yeah.
Weakness in the organs and musculature. Okay, that person should try and strengthen that area. When you try to create a strength, the diarrhea may increase. So you have to be very careful how that strength is created. Not all the time, every day.
When you say they're strengthening, are you talking directly of inversions or something else?
Any other posture.
But are you saying inversions would help that person as much as the
Yes.
constipated person?
Yes.
So in other words, you're saying inversions are a regulator. If you're on one side of the spectrum or the other, it's going to try to bring you back to...
Yeah. Experience has shown that the inversions will be done differently. Like for somebody who has diarrhea, inversions would be more of a supported kind. Even let's say they do Sarvangasana, it's not full Sarvangasana.
You would give them the wall or the chair?
Give them a wall or even more support.
So as not
And
to...
also it is generally not done with straight legs. If you make the legs very active, it will cause diarrhea.
So which version would you give them? Chair? Oh,
Chair with legs folded,
I see.
bent knees, and even the legs are tied more.
Okay. So also we know that going upside down is not so good for people with high blood pressure, generally. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no.
As a general rule?
As a general rule, yes.
Yeah.
And, because this is being recorded, I'm reluctant to say this, but I will say it. You take somebody like glaucoma or detached retina, even more,
Yeah.
should not do inversion ever under any circumstances.
Right.
Mr. Iyengar will put them in a pelvic sling. But this is Mr. Iyengar doing
Right.
it, and he's constantly watching what's going on.
Right.
Yeah? He waits for certain signal and says, that's long enough today, come out. So by giving a posture that can be damaging, he's pushing the envelope. But he knows when to get the person out. And this person's detached retina is cured. That doesn't mean an average teacher should be taking an average student who has detached retina and putting them upside down.
Right.
Okay? What is generally true and medically proven to be true, that putting the head down like that is dangerous when you already have this eye problem, that should be respected. When you come to someone like Mr. Iyengar who knows what he's doing and changes it, then you go by the fact that you are in the hands of a real expert here.
Right. Okay.
But I don't want that to, for the medical science people who are listening to this to say, we will also experiment. They don't do that.
Because they don't know yoga.
They don't know what to watch for.
Right.
Watching blood pressure and so on is not enough.
Well, where I was going is, so people who are menstruating, people generally with high blood pressure without a grandmaster, someone with the detached retina, is there any other reason why you would advise a student not to do inversions?
If they're afraid of it. That probably is a bigger reason than anything else. If they're afraid, I'm not dealing with inversion, I'm dealing with fear. Okay? So I'll find different ways of dealing with fear. Okay? An example, perhaps not an excellent example, but somebody is afraid of going in a pelvic sling.
Right.
Okay? So I support them. I put my foot on a chair, They're lying down basically on my leg. Little by little, I lower them. Once they give they take a couple of breaths, which indicates to me that, okay, this person is relaxing. I start swinging them.
That seems like you're pushing it a little bit.
I am
now.
pushing a little bit. But that gets rid of the fear. Now the person is, able to do it on their own.
Right.
What are you afraid of? The maximum fear for that person does not come up when they're trying to go into the posture. It's when they drop back. That's when the fear climaxes. So I swing them to say, look, it's fun.
Right.
And I have definitely had people who would put their hands out and say, okay,
I want out.
I want out. So you bring them out.
Okay.
But you hold on to them and ask them to hold on to the rope. Okay? Relax the brain, head, diaphragm.
Yeah.
Okay? Once you see them breathing properly, you bring them out. And even that person, I never had a case like this, but suppose somebody says, that was fine one time, but I never want to do that again without you being here. I would say, fine, you should not.
Right. Well, for years, students would regularly ask me, like, what if you only have 30 minutes for your practice? What do you do? And I'm like,
Pray.
No, I say down dog. No, I'm telling you what I would say is down dog, handstand, headstand, shoulderstand, shavasana. If I only had a half an hour, but I was reflecting on that, given we were going to talk about this today, and I don't really know why I would do that. I mean, I think because I've heard it's the best thing to do, but not because I have a felt sense, oh, that's what I should do. So you wouldn't recommend that for a seasoned student who has an inversion practice. They only have limited
Let's
time.
assume the person is young,
Yeah.
just very busy.
Yeah.
Okay? I would say, you know what? Tomorrow, do downward dog. 1 minute each time. Do it 3 times. Slowly increase that. When you are able to do downward dog practically for the 30 minutes you have, apart from relaxing at the end,
Yeah.
then start doing sun salutes. Surya Namaskar. Learn to do Surya Namaskar. Don't tomorrow do 108, but learn to get to that level. You are a young person. You are just very busy. Okay? Do 108 sun salutes. Don't do it every day. You will be in trouble if you do. Okay? Learn to do it once a week. Slowly increase it twice a week. And then see how far you can push it. You will find your whole energetic level, instead of being tired, you are going to find you have a lot more energy to do what you want to do. If I ask you to do 108 sun salutes on the first day, you are going to find yourself depleted. You will feel tired. Okay? Then I'll give you my example that, I have done it in a way where I would get up in the middle of the night almost, 3 o'clock in the morning, and do 108 sun salutes, go back to bed. I wake up with a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that you have to have a long time practice and what do I want to say? That you keep that faith. For example, you kept us in shoulder stand yesterday for a very long time, and it was challenging, but I could do it. And I knew.
It was very long for you.
It was very long for me.
From what I was seeing,
right.
and I'm thinking of myself,
it
was very short.
Okay. So
next week will be longer.
But I knew that I would feel better afterwards. And I did.
Yes.
I mean, I felt fantastic, right? So it's what I'm getting at is it's harder. You couldn't start a beginner and just tell them that, oh, don't worry, you'll feel so much better after, because they just don't have that level.
See, usually whatever I do on Wednesday, I try and make it a little more subtle on Thursday, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But yesterday, Thursday group happened to be people that I felt are more adept. There was almost no complete beginner that could be hurt by that sort of thing. And if they can, the permission was come down, don't hold it.
Right.
Okay? But I could push that group. I could not push the same group. I did not feel comfortable pushing that group on Wednesday.
Right.
it's like a painting. It evolves. To say, why did you do this brush and put it in this stroke, is not a good question.
Right. Well, I want to end with a quote by Mr. Iyengar. I don't know if you've heard this, and maybe it's just legend, and maybe he didn't really say it, but you can't be depressed with open armpits. You can't be depressed with open armpits, and that was his kind of encouragement to get you to do handstand. Or maybe Urdhva Dhanurasana. What do you think about that?
I mean, it makes a little sense to me.
I like it.
But I have not heard Mr. Iyengar say that.
So it may be urban legend.
Could be.
But maybe we'll check into that to see if
I have
that's
known
true.
a teacher who is saying something, and to impress upon the students that this is to be like I'm saying, this person says it's so in Bhagavad Gita. So I waited. I was in the room. I waited for the person to finish the class. When that person came after the class, I said, where in Bhagavad Gita it says so? And this person says to me, that wasn't for you, Ramanand. Which means they're using a superior authority to impress something upon the student. Unfortunately, what they were impressing was wrong also. But I didn't get there.
So perhaps the person who said this about the armpits was doing the same thing.
Possibly.
But maybe Mr. Iyengar said it.
If it's helpful, see, if it helps, what's wrong with a lie?
Okay. Shall we leave it there?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean,
maybe
the story that comes to mind is, I'm sitting in a room which has several doors. Somebody comes running and says, "Hey, help me, somebody's after me to kill me." I said, okay, go through that door, run away. They run away, and the person who is angry comes with a knife behind him and says, "Did you see this person?" I say, yeah, I sort of did. Which door did they run through? Would I point at the correct door?
No.
Absolutely not. Somebody says, but Ramanand, what about you wanting to be honest? I said, look, if I really want to be honest, I would say, mister, I know, I saw the person, I know which door they went through, but I'm not going to tell you. Then I get the knife.
Exactly.
It's a stupid thing to do. You're
So
allowed.
nonviolence is more important than truth.
Yes. Every time.
I think that's a good place to end. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.